Peter, you're welcome. Thanks for joining us. Okay, sweet. So let's get rolling. Number one, thank you everyone for joining us here today. We have quite an exciting kind of Trailblazer interview. So the whole point of this series is basically to talk to really smart people about how they built their accounting or bookkeeping practice and kind of their journey to where they are today. And hopefully we can share some fun learnings and advice as part of those conversations. So I'd love to welcome Hector Garcia. I think everyone knows him, but for those that don't, he is certainly, I think, one of the most kind of well-known kind of educators in the QuickBooks ecosystem and runs his own like successful practice. And fun fact, not many people know, has an excellent guacamole recipe. So
the only thing that matters, really.
Awesome. So just a couple of quick housekeeping items. This is being recorded, so if you need to jump at some point, don't worry, we will send you the recording afterwards. Two, if you have any questions as we're going through, we'll be keeping an eye on the Q&A. You see that functionality in the Zoom bar, I guess. So please do ask questions as we're going through it. I'm happy to dive in. We'll also set aside about 10 to 15 minutes just for general questions for Hector as well. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let's get into it. So Hector, for those that don't know, like, how are you currently splitting your time? Like, what are all the different things you're working on?
Sure. So outside from being a father of 4 and having to help my wife handle some of the kids while the other ones are being homeschooled and all that stuff, I have an accounting practice. We have about 8 people in staff in the team in total, including myself. The accounting practice is based out of Miami. Everybody kind of does their own thing. I do all the marketing, let's call it that, by creating videos about accounting, taxes, and YouTube. And then the rest of the team kind of takes in all the clients and does the traditional bookkeeping, tax return, QuickBooks training type of work. And occasionally I get involved in the more complex deals or give my 2 cents or a second opinion on any of those transactions or clients that the team is handling. For the most part, I will spend maybe 10 to 15 hours a week actually talking to clients. And the other time, I'm actually either reading, writing, podcasting, webinars, interviewing, talking, and recording video tutorials into my YouTube channel. The way I generate income, part of it is through YouTube, believe it or not. YouTube actually pays a decent amount, not, I would say enough to pay the mortgage, let's call it that. And the other one is by reselling QuickBooks. So people buy QuickBooks from me, QuickBooks Online, QuickBooks Desktop, and we get paid for that as a firm. And then I obviously, as the owner of the firm, I make something in the process of doing accounting and tax for all of our clients. I do sign all the tax returns myself. I prepare the tax returns myself. Most of the accounting and bookkeeping work is done by my team. I would say that's me in a nutshell, professionally.
Amazing. That's awesome. And so, like, let's kind of take it back a little bit. What kind of got you started with bookkeeping? Like, what did you actually do before running this world?
Sure. So I started my bookkeeping practice in 2008, which is the same year that the financial crisis happened. And it's also the same year that my daughter was born, my first kid was born. And it's all interrelated. So I used to work in a bank and I used to do small business banking. So my job was to bring small businesses into the bank to bank with us. And we did loans, right? Small business loans, lines of credit. And I would say that was my first real exposure to small business financial statements. For a period of 4 years that I was in banking, I saw probably 1,000 profit and loss and balance sheets. 99% of them were a mess. And during the process of me looking at a lot of financial statements and fighting with a lot of small business owners because their loan get declined and explaining what about the fundamental information of the financial statements causes the banks to want to go forward or not with the loan. I learned quite a lot about sort of real world financial statements. In 2008, my daughter was born. I was sitting in the hospital. You spend 3 days in the hospital typically when your kid is born. And I remember the second day after she was born, I was watching TV and I saw my bank, the one I used to work in, which was called Wachovia at the time, be declared insolvent and be sold to Citibank. So I'm like, okay, I guess I work for Citibank now. This is why I'm holding my newborn. And then the next day, the government decided, no, Citibank's not good. We're going to sell it to Wells Fargo. So then the next day, I guess I worked for Wells Fargo. So imagine sitting in the hospital with your newborn, with all the stresses of being a new father, and then watching on TV that the bank that you work on might not be existent anymore. So that something triggered in my brain saying, I think I got to hedge this, right? I got to make sure that if this banking thing doesn't work out, I got to look for something else. So that basically sparked me researching different ideas, different sort of, let's call it side businesses. For the most part, I was kind of secure about my job because I was good at what I did. And I figured, I'll get a job in a bank anywhere really. But my wife was dealing with a newborn and we basically lost, half of the income because she basically decided she wanted to stay home with the baby, which I was fine with it. So I was researching, look, what if I find something that she could do remotely, maybe customer service or translation or maybe, bilingual phone support, maybe I just looked at many things, medical billing, and then I really stumbled upon bookkeeping out of all the options. And I looked into what the requirements were to get a bookkeeping certification, to get a QuickBooks certification, to be a ProAdvisor. And we went that route. Basically, we started a bookkeeping business with my wife as the headliner and me sort of as a silent helper on the side. And fortunately, I was able to keep my banking job. And within the year that I had my full-time job and we had the baby and we were little by little growing our little side hustle bookkeeping practice on the side, I completely fell in love with the profession. I fell in love with, like, I felt that I had a much bigger impact helping people get their books right versus what I was doing or not doing in the bank in the very difficult times that it was 2008, 2009, 2010 to land and help small businesses. So naturally, I ended up quitting my bank job and dedicating 100% to working with my wife in this. And we built this bookkeeping practice for about 3 to 4 years. And then at that 3 or 4 year mark, someone told me, why don't you teach me how to do it? And I was like, no, you pay me and I do it for you. They're like, no, I'll pay you triple if you teach me how to do it. And I was like, interesting. Someone can pay triple if I teach them how to do it. So then I started doing training, and that's really where everything sort of started. So I fell in love even more with the training aspect, with teaching the accounting and the bookkeeping and the QuickBooks work. And within 3 years of doing just private one-on-one teaching, I basically built my own classroom. And we had my office and a classroom next to it. And we were the only local private accounting firm in the area that was actively teaching QuickBooks in the market. And we did that for about 3 to 4 years until I started my YouTube channel in 2015 really. And then I dedicated more of the teaching per se to YouTube. And then I had started having some of my employees, which now are partners, do the teaching in the classroom. So I kind of shifted to YouTube. So and now today, this is kind of where we are. We have a firm that's part educator, part training, part we became a QuickBooks partner, a reseller, part software sales and implementation, and part traditional accounting. So I would say that's kind of the pathway on how we got to where we were and all the little steps in between.
So going from kind of that moment where you're watching Wachovia, sell to Citibank, and then the next day find out they're being sold to Wells Fargo, and just kind of having that roller coaster, especially with the stress of a newborn, right? And the excitement that comes with it. It sounds like you started the firm with your wife out of necessity to begin with, but quickly found something that you're like deeply passionate about. And once it switched from kind of like, okay, this is something I have to do to something I want to do, what do you kind of imagine for the future for the firm? Like what was kind of your ideal dream?
Sure. So before I'll do some preface to that. Before I was in banking, I worked in retail. So I worked in Best Buy, I worked in Circuit City, and my knowledge of dealing with customers, I would say like the individual customers, was a retail environment, right? Fixed price tags, box moving, that sort of thing. When I moved into banking, it turned into a shirt and tie scenario. It was a different, more of a service based approach. And when I was in Best Buy, I actually saw a company called Geek Squad be sold to Best Buy. So Geek Squad was this 100% service-based business that had this corporate culture and quirk around being a bunch of geeks that fix computers. And Best Buy bought them, and they basically took to the masses a very specific business model where they all had fixed prices and they all had a specific uniform and a specific culture. When I founded my company, that was my vision. I figured I'll create a bookkeeping practice that has its own sort of personality, and then maybe I can make it a brand, and maybe I can sell it to a big firm at some point in the future. So I did have those. That was in the horizon, like that sort of vision. Now it didn't pan out that way. If I wasn't that good at building a sellable brand per se, and unfortunately I took the turn to build a personal brand rather than a brand that's got corporate brand. And that's how I was kind of pushed into the YouTube you know uh, path, and leveraging my personal brand to create some change in the world, and attract customers while we're at it. So that was kind of the vision that we had. It never really went in that direction, but one vision that we had from the beginning, which it did make full circle, is I didn't want to charge by the hour. I wanted to charge based on a fixed fee, based on a menu price. So when I first founded the company, I created a menu right away on bookkeeping services. Like start a new company, this price; set up a new QuickBooks file, this price; reconcile the first bank account, this price. Like everything was a menu price. Now, what's interesting about it is over time, I found out that I wasn't that good at building a price list that would tie into my capacities and my time, and just be able to do time management with it. So I actually reverted and broke the rule and went to pricing based on time, because I just got really busy, and it was the only way I figured I could control my schedule and my limited schedule and my capacity. And then it took a few years of charging by the hour and continuously increasing that price rate to switch to a more value-based approach, a fixed based approach. And today we kind of have a hybrid of that initial intent to have a menu so people know upfront what they can buy off the shelf, let's call it that. And then for custom services, for more project-based services, we don't measure time at all. We do it based on what we think is the value to the customer. So I would say that's the only thing from the beginning, from the vision, that's kind of made full circle and stayed true to the practice.
Wow. That's very ahead of the curve, right? Like to do that in 2009, 2010, to actually offer like fixed pricing. You must have been like one of the few,
Sure.
very in North America.
Again, I copy wasn't ahead of the curve. I basically took the Geek Squad price list and kind of changed the numbers and changed the titles of the services. But it was me copying what I have learned from the retail world.
Right. But in the accounting and bookkeeping world, that was like actually a very unique approach, even if it was borrowed, right, from like the Geek Squad experience.
Sure, but I won't give myself credit as an innovator, because I knew nothing about the bookkeeping and accounting space. It wasn't something that I was exposed to. Like I
Right.
started my bookkeeping practice out of a necessity to give my wife a a business that she could do and control her in her own time, and I ended up uh, going doing and managing it, and sort of being the head person pushing it a few years later. But it wasn't my intention to become a bookkeeper or start a bookkeeping practice for myself or for my career. I was a banker at that point. I was a finance guy. So I had zero exposure to bookkeeping. The only reason I started a bookkeeping practice beyond, the reasons I explained is I saw the opportunity as a banker with all these financial statements that were given to the bank and these messes and these balance sheets that didn't make any sense. And what was most interesting is you work in a bank and you have a client walk in and say, I need a loan, right? And then as a banker, you say, sure, fill out this application, give me 3 years of tax returns, give me current financial statements. Usually the customer understands something completely different and brings you a picture of their cousin and brings you a contract for a vehicle from 3 years ago. And you're like, dude, this is not what I asked for. And they're like, I don't know anything about this. Ask my accountant. And then I'm like, okay, fine. So then as a banker, I go ask the accountant, and the accountant's like, what do you need? What do you need that for? This and that. Talk to the client. The client needs to tell me what I need. And I saw the whole accountant customer communication so broken. And even when we were able to successfully tell them, dude, I need 3 years of tax returns. I need the most current financial statement. When they understood that and I got it in there, usually there was a delay of a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And you go back to the business owner and say, why is it taking you so long to get that? They're like, I don't know. Talk to my accountant. So I saw these really dysfunctional relationship between the business owners, the accountant, the amount of stuff that the business owner actually knew that the accountant was doing, the amount of communication and trust that the accountant had for their customer to give them that information or to explain it to them. And I saw, you know what? I think that if I do create a bookkeeping and accounting practice and my clients go to a bank and they ask for financial statements, I'm going to have everything ready up front proactively with my letter of explanation, with everything. And that was kind of the theme behind it is I do not ever want one of my customers to have this really negative experience dealing with the bank. Obviously, that came from personal experience and personal experience only. So that would be a main theme that I have that I have tried to respect from the founding or the vision of the company.
So now that you've been doing this, 10 plus years, I think it's easy to kind of look back and like, oh, this obviously all kind of makes sense and has worked out. In those early days, were you nervous? Were you concerned that this might not work? This might not be the right thing?
Yeah, sure. I mean, especially because I wasn't a degreed accountant and neither was my wife. So in our state, in Florida, you don't need to have a degree in accounting or anything like that to provide, quote, accounting services. Some states in the US, you have to have a license to do that. I don't know how it works in Canada, but I think that in Canada, you can't call yourself a certified bookkeeper unless you have an actual real certification, I assume. Maybe you can correct me on that. But there isn't a lot of regulation around what the minimum requirements are to do this. So I was afraid from the perspective that I was doing something that didn't have a general guideline, right? Didn't have a license or a system in place. And I was basically picking and choosing my own, right? I became a ProAdvisor through QuickBooks. I read my own accounting and bookkeeping books. I was making these interpretations sort of on my own. So the biggest fear for me was doing it wrong. And I knew that if I did it wrong, my business wouldn't be sustainable. So that was fear number one. Fear number two was the fear that my customers or my leads per se would fear that I was too young to do this, right? When I started my business, I was in my late 20s. I started my business at 29 years old. And most accountants, at least from my perspective, from working with bank, most accountants are old, gray-haired people, right? So I was like thinking, am I as a 29-year-old, can I effectively compete with someone that looks like they have the experience? That not necessarily mean they have it, but they probably do, right? Because most accountants basically pick their career in their 20s and they're accountants for the rest of their life. It's kind of a very common use case. So one of my fear was, will people not respect me or respect my work because of how young I was? And in many cases, I was right. I mean, the people shouldn't respect my work because I was young and naive and I didn't know what I was doing. But as I started getting good at what I did, right? And my hair was still dark. It wasn't getting white or gray. I wasn't getting old per se. I wasn't looking like I had experience. My only possible way to showcase that experience was to put it out there. And that's how YouTube came into play. That's where it became a perfect avenue for me to prove that I have the experience, even if I don't look like I have the experience. A lot of people don't believe that I'm 40 years old, like, because I look young, right? So that was my fear for the most part at the beginning. Now, because of my YouTube channel, because of my client base, because of the community I built, I no longer have that insecurity. But to answer your question, that was probably my two biggest fears.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I'm sure there's many people on this call that share similar insecurities, right? I think we all feel some version of that when we're starting out on something. Um, so, you know, you mentioned that like you've been very successful at finding people that are like high quality that you can delegate work to, right? So that you can, kind of focus on other areas of the business. So for instance, on the accounting, like on the bookkeeping side, you found people who could do that work. You trust them with it. Great. Okay. Next, I want to do this education training thing. Let's figure that out and then find people that can sit in there. And now the focus for you is like focus on marketing, focus on developing the YouTube channel. Kind of as you've gone on that journey, how have you thought about, you mentioned like building kind of brand, and how have you thought about building like personal brand as part of it?
So again, I'm not a good example of someone that can build a corporate entity brand as well as someone that can build a good personal brand. And most of it was lack of discipline, honestly, around mentioning the company beyond mentioning myself. It seemed easier and quicker to represent myself in my content, right? So I'm the one that knows this stuff. I'm the one that's good at this stuff. I'm the one that's going to show you how to do this. And that was my mistake. I think if I were able to go back in time, I would have build a community around my business entity name and not myself, because I would have created a more of a sellable firm, a more of a sellable product. However, there's pros and cons to it, right? So when you have a strong personal brand, your endorsement means a lot. Okay, your personal endorsement means a lot. And I think personal endorsements are more valuable than corporate endorsements, right? Even you see this in politics, right? So so and so person is supporting so and so candidate. It's much more valuable than X company is supporting X candidate. And what's interesting is a company represents 1,000 people, 10,000 people, 20,000 people. It represents billions of dollars of revenue or whatever. Like, companies usually represent a lot larger, deeper impact than individuals. But people tend to place credibility and reputation on specific people. And even though it didn't play really well for me in terms of building a corporate brand that I could sell, that I could fulfill my vision to sell to a big firm or whatever, I was able to build a really strong personal brand that allows me to leverage my word when it comes to negotiation, for example. So when a client starts talking about, hey, so and so can do it down the street, and then I say, what's the name of that company? Yeah, well, last time I checked, I don't work there, so you're not going to get the same product, right? So you're negotiating with me because you're getting me, right? And then people go, yeah, you're right, absolutely, that makes absolute sense. Or I could say, wait, they'll say something like, so and so can do it for cheaper, and I can say, can you show me their YouTube channel? I just want to make sure that they have covered their bases on this specialty that you need. You need someone that specializes in this, and they go, well, I can't find the YouTube channel. It's like, dude, exactly. It's like you're working with someone that has exposed themselves personally, right? Exposed themselves to lawsuits, right? If I give somebody negative tax advice in YouTube, for example, and someone takes it to their detriment, I mean, not that I think they will lose, that I will lose the case, but people could sue me, right? I'm, even if you have disclaimers. So someone that's exposing themselves by giving away what they know, by telling people what they think, by giving them their opinion, by exposing their experience and their journey in a podcast or in a YouTube channel, that has a lot of deep credibility. And you can rest assured that I leverage that. So when I'm selling an education product, when I'm selling a video training package or something, I know my stuff is not highly produced like someone that has a studio and a bunch of different microphones and cameras and a whole team that can edit the videos and make it perfect. I know I can't compete with them, uh, quality of product wise, but they don't have me. They are not me. And what people sometimes buy is, I know that even if there's mistakes, I know if it's not perfectly looking, I know that it comes from a person that I believe. And I landed that by accident. This is not something that this wasn't by design. I didn't say I'm a very credible person, I should go build a personal brand. Just, I created content. It came from me. It sounds like me when I do it, right? I have a very distinctive voice and accent, in the marketplace. I don't sound like the standard issue accountant. Like when people hear me and they know who they're listening to from, right? So I ended up realizing that had some power, and I've leveraged that. And the hardest thing has been, trying to know that, being aware of that, and also conduct yourself with humility. That's a very difficult thing to do because, as a professional, not as a YouTuber or as myself, as a professional, someone that prides themselves on being a master of their craft, regardless of who you are and what kind of marketing you've had. You want your work to be worth something. Like you don't want people to come back to you and say, I'll get somebody else to do it for cheaper. Like that's the biggest stab in the back that you can hear from a client or a customer. So I made it a personal thing that if someone ever has a dispute about the value that I provide, that they will not have the goal to call it out in public, right? They'll say, you know what, I can't afford it, and then they can internalize it themselves. So when you build a personal brand or you put value around the personal brand, that's probably going to be the most important piece. Is have you built the credibility that will help you build the confidence that you can tell clients no, not that you're worried about clients saying no to you. So again, I wish I had done it as a corporate brand, because I would have been able to leverage everything different. I wouldn't have to be in every YouTube video. I wouldn't have to be in this interview with you, Joseph. I could send one of my employees to do it. But having a personal brand means showing up, and that has his pros and cons. Right. The nice thing is that because it's a personal brand, I don't care too much about uh, tiptoeing around personal opinions. Like people know that personal opinions are personal opinions, right? In a corporation, you have to do things through the legal team or whatever, right? So that's what I like too, that it's easier for me to both educate and teach what I do and what I know, and also be able to quickly state my opinion without having to worry whether or not it's on or off brand.
Nice. I love the number one. I hope that being on this interview is not a con.
I'm talking about leveraging. I'm talking about leveraging time, Joseph.
Yeah. No.
We're friends, and that's not what I meant. I'm talking about leverage time. Yeah, we gotta leverage. All of us. That's what we want. We want to leverage our time, right?
Yeah, man. No. I'm just teasing. I love the notion of like the deep credibility that comes from like kind of having skin in the game, where you're like, hey, I'm out there, I'm telling people how they should do things, and I'm taking personal risk because that's how much I believe in what I'm doing. That's like a really powerful notion. And like just to press a little bit more on the personal brand, like at what point were you like, okay, this is actually like meaningful and this is what's going to drive that credibility? Like, was there a kind of an aha moment, or is it something that just kind of evolved over time?
Yeah, I think social media, with all the negative implications of social media helped quite a bit. The community in YouTube, in the comments, it's called the comment section of YouTube, which many people see it as a negative thing. But in my channel, the comment section, it's rare. It's mostly a good thing. Yeah, there's some critics, but it's mostly a good thing. And when I post stuff on Facebook too, people give me real time. People are quick to give their opinion about whether they like something or not. And people are most likely to tell you, I love that it was great, than to be a hard critic about what your area of improvement is. But I try to conduct myself with such a high level of sincerity. And I tend to be the first one to say, yeah, I made a mistake. That's something that I meant to say something else. I screwed up, right? And that's it. And when you are sort of blatantly honest about the mistakes that you make, and then you ask people for feedback, hey, what do you think I could do to improve myself? And your stuff is valuable in itself. People will respond to the call and say, well, the only thing they're asking from me is for some feedback, constructive feedback, other than you're great, that was great. And they start giving it to you. And don't ever underestimate the value of good, positive, constructive feedback and the well thought of constructive feedback. And I use that a lot. So when someone in a YouTube comment or in a Facebook comment says, I think you should have covered this, I think you should have done that. I take it. Like I'll give you an example. So I was doing a lot of webinars. This is in 2015, and I started the webinar with "Hi guys," right? I don't know. I don't know why I did that. I mean, maybe I was picking that up from the way YouTubers do it. And then somebody says, "Stop saying hi guys. It's exclusive." And I never really thought of it that way, right? That hi guys is a male thing, and I changed it to hi folks, and then I now say hi folks. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it just kind of, so you take that feedback and you modify your language or the way you do it, but then it becomes a brand. Like hi folks is something that not a lot of people say, or actually I think it's not a unique thing, but at least it's different. Like a lot of people say hi guys or whatever. So that's what I mean. What I mean is I take that feedback and I adapt it to the way I see and understand things. And sometimes that feedback becomes permanent changes on the way I conduct myself in the future.
That's awesome. Like the deep credibility with kind of the deep understanding of kind of what the customer needs. It sounds like that has put you in a position where you can comfortably like negotiate with your clients and kind of have the confidence to say, hey, this is Hector, this is me, this is what you're getting, right? And it's a product that I approve, and that's why you're not going to go down the street to the cheaper alternative. And so you mentioned at the beginning of your practice you had kind of this menu style set of services, and then you moved to hourly because things were getting a little too crazy, and now you've moved back to kind of a mix between kind of fixed pricing plus hourly. How do you think about pricing at your practice, and like kind of what's working, what could be better?
Sure. So I'm a studious person of value pricing, and Ron Baker and all the other leaders in the area that kind of push for uh, pricing based on value and not pricing based on hours. I've I've I I respect most of the tenets of value pricing. However, I found that because of the volume of people that knock on my door, right? And this is because of YouTube. People will send me an email saying, I saw your video of X, Y, and Z. Thank you. However, I do need to ask you a few questions. How much you charge for that, right? So, and I get 3 of those a day. So how would I, in the tenets of value pricing, you would have a long, deep value conversation with the customer every single time to determine the value of the work that we can provide from you, and therefore we'll provide a flat fee for an entire project. But a lot of these people, really all they want is to pick my brain for a little bit because they have 1 or 2 questions, and they find value on you being the person that they ask, and not, get this, their own accountant, which is kind of interesting, So for those people, I created a menu, like sort of a first-time customer menu style price, where you get a flat fee up front. We block a certain amount of time, and then within that time frame, we can cover and talk about whatever we want. In that time frame that's paid, I do, without the customer knowing, I do a value conversation, right? I actually take my time to understand what the client wants. And then if the client wants to do a second thing after they do that first session that they paid for, I now have enough tools to say, I think what you need is quarterly review of your QuickBooks, quarterly tax planning, and for me to sit down with your CPA at the end of the year and make sure that everything we talked about is discussed for that tax return. On top of that, I think you need to be able to have access to me via email for unlimited tax or QuickBooks questions. And it looks like you're applying for a bank, so you're probably going to need our team too to prepare special reports like aging reports or whatever, or budget reports. So I'm also going to include that in a annual package, and here's the cost. Boom. So sometimes the client didn't know they were being probed for being offered a value price, a fixed price, all-inclusive service, but that happens in that first call when they're actually paying to quote unquote pick my brain. And at the beginning, it feels like an hourly rate, but it isn't. What I do is I have I have a 1 hour, I call it 1 hour consultation or 2 hour workshop. That's what we call it. So if you have if I'm going to block an hour of my calendar, and that will be a consultation. You can ask me whatever you want. I can look at whatever you want. You can get my opinion about whatever you want me to opine. If I can opine on it immediately, if I need to do some research, I'll let you know how much the research will cost. If you actually want me to go into your computer, modify something, press some keys, touch an Excel file, touch QuickBooks, show you what buttons to press, we call that a 2 hour workshop, and that has a different price. I mean, if you watch this video 3 years from now, 5 years from now, the prices might change, but just as a point of reference, I will charge $375 for that 1 hour consultation or $650 for that 2 hour workshop. And that's the only way you can start working with me. You don't have another option. You don't have, there's no other price I can give you for any product or service until we do that first. Now, 1 hour consultation or a 2 hour workshop. If the client says, no, Hector, I want you to clean my books, I want you to do my taxes, I want you to give me a price, and I would say, okay, let's start with a 1 hour consultation. And if you feel that you shouldn't pay for a consultation, I'll take that money and apply it towards the project. But you gotta pay to speak with me. And that's something that I have evolved to when it comes to pricing, because at the very beginning, and I think many people watching this webinar or recorded video do that proverbial 15-minute free consultation, or that proverbial 30-minute, 1 hour free review or whatever, because it's worth it. It's worth investing 50 minutes to an hour to figuring out whether or not you're a good fit for the client, and vice versa. That is generally worth it. If you have zero marketing budget, if you do no work or no effort building a position or a brand, I think that's worth it, right? So instead of spending what I spend the equivalent of maybe $10,000 a month in marketing, between my potential billable time, between the all the equipment I buy for YouTube, the people that I pay to help me clean up and do some editing. I do spend quite a bit of money in marketing producing YouTube content. But if you're doing zero YouTube content, I get it, why you would spend an hour to get a potential client. But I'm in a different position. I will not spend any time and talk to anyone, at least via voice or Zoom or whatever, unless they pay first. Now, if they ask me an email question and the question is answerable, let's call it that, I would probably take my time and answer that email question. Now, I'll give you a really important piece of insight about those free consultations, because it does tie into pricing. Is if somebody wants to ask me a free consultation, let's call it that, that will be done via email, I route him through my office, and my office sets him a set of questions. It's like maybe like 8 questions, right? What industry you're in, what are your annual sales, what do you expect your sales to be next year? I have a set of questions. The last question is, if we could wave a magic wand, what problem would you like us to solve immediately? And typically that question does grant that customer's desired future state, and that gives you a great baseline for you to work from. If people ask their question and give us that preliminary information, and the magic wand question sounds like something that we can do, and it could be a 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, whatever lucrative means to you type of project, then I could decide whether or not it's worth, maybe I'll give this client a call proactively and spend 10 minutes to just clarify something. But I have enough information up front to determine whether or not this client is a major tire kicker, or is someone that's exactly in my niche, exactly in my wheelhouse, and it sounds like something that we are uniquely positioned to solve for them, and it'll be a relatively easy sale from that point forward. So if I don't know anything about the client and you want to pick my brain, you got to pay. If you want to ask me a question because you also are not ready to pay, but you want to know whether or not I'm set for that, I need you to give me enough information that I can use, I can see if I can leverage to then invest whatever time it takes to answer a question or call someone real quick to potentially get the new client.
Got it. And it sounds like all of that's rooted in just truly understanding what your value is and what value you can deliver to your clients and who that right client is. Um, so let's say you go through that initial consultation, you have the 1 hour, or you do the 2 hour workshop. Are you setting up your clients on like a monthly kind of fixed fee schedule? How does it work?
Sure. So you're talking about consultations or like bookkeeping, accounting work?
Yeah, bookkeeping, accounting work. So you
Right.
do that 1 hour consultation or 2 hour workshop, and then the client's like, yeah, I want to work with you, Hector. What does that type of engagement typically look like?
So I personally don't have any clients on engagement myself. I do transformation projects, right? So if you know where you want to be, right? If you know where you are and you know where you want to be, and I understand it, and I have a strong feeling that I can help you get there, right? And I know the value of transforming you into there. I will put a price tag to that, and I'll do a project, and you will be working with me through the project, whatever it is, right? Whether it is to implement inventory in your accounting system, whether it is to delegate some of the tasks to your salespeople so they start entering the sales in QuickBooks themselves and pulling the reports, and you as a business owner start trusting your team so you can focus on business development or whatever that transformation project, which is a combination between fixing up old accounting, getting their QuickBooks system correctly, because that's my weapon of choice. That's the tool that I'm known to work really well, and getting someone to see their business differently, and kind of positioning the business owner and the managers to focus on business growth and not on the tedium of accounting and bookkeeping. That's what I do. I do those type of projects. Anyone that wants to go on an engagement like a monthly bookkeeping, quarterly bookkeeping, I that gets directed to my team, and they deal with my team 100%. And I tell people that, because people say, I want to work with you. I say, look, you got to work with my team. I have to be able to leverage my time. However, if at any point in time you have a dispute with someone on the team, or a difference in opinion, I will be there for a second opinion. I'll be there. Let's call it, I'll be the tiebreaker, right? Something like that.
Nice. Okay, that makes sense. And then, so if you were to look back, like from where the firm is today, where you have, multiple teams running different parts of the business, and you can really focus on the thing that drives the most value for the business, which is really, focusing on that marketing. Um, were there like key decision points that you're really thankful for that kind of disproportionately contributed to the success to this point?
Absolutely. So the key decision I made is I met Alejandro, who's one of my partners. I met Alejandro in 2013, I believe. And I saw him, I saw his work, I liked him, and he was charging like $25 an hour. I remember he was wearing a suit, charging $25 an hour to do bookkeeping on site wearing a suit. And I used to laugh at that because I was wearing like, I was like a Best Buy uniforms type, right? Because remember, that's kind of my background. And I was laughing at that. I was like, dude, I can hire you. And I thought from the beginning, I'm like, look, if this guy's charging 25, I can hire him, leverage him, charge 75. Like my commercial, monopolistic, capitalistic mind was already functioning that way. But then I said, you know what? What if I bring him in on I like him enough that I could bring him on as a partner, and make him allow him to own the business, allow him to own what he does. So we built I kind of invented a system where I own the business and I own the brand, and I license the brand to him. So he uses my company name and can leverage my name, and he has an accounting firm on his own. Every one of my clients that I bring in, they're actually his clients, right? And they go to his firm. His firm has the same name as mine. It's all intertwined. I own part of the business. He owns part of mine. That's all intertwined. And to the customer, it's indifferent, but the business is his. Now, in exchange, I get a percentage. I get 10% of everything the business does. So basically, I get to leverage an entire accounting firm that uses my same brand and is my best friend and my partner in the business that runs the business. I get to leverage that as if I was this huge firm without any of the investments or the headache or the HR and all that stuff. Um, I repeated that again with my second partner, with Alexander. This was like about a year later, and we built the exact same thing. So our firm is basically four firms. There's my firm, that's me and my wife, and that's it, no more employees. There's Alejandro's firm, which is him and his assistant, that's it. There's Alexander's firm, which is him and his assistant. And then we have a firm that all three of us own that pays for the office, and two other team members that do more of the admin, phone call, follow up, you know, leftover office administrator. Very important work, by the way, some marketing and stuff. And then we all pay into that firm that the fixed fee of that, but each of us deal with our clients on our own, and each of us is ourself, the accountant, and our, let's say, our right hand. So we have this really strange hybrid of a system where, you know, each of us is an accountant and an assistant, let's call it that, and then there's two sort of marketing overall people that serve the entire firm. What that allowed me to do is allowed me to grow my firm, let's call it quote unquote, without having to be also a CEO and a manager of so many people. So I don't know.
That's really cool. I had no idea. That's a really innovative structure, actually.
Right. And by the way, that's before, you know, virtualization and all that stuff. I think that once you virtualize and all this post-pandemic stuff, once you virtualize, you can do this as well, right? But the problem is this doesn't work if you don't have a strong brand name, right? So because what would be the value on somebody else giving you a percentage of their business or whatever to be part of your group? The only reason I can leverage this is my brand name, which I would have been able to leverage this by creating a company brand name too, but no one knows the name of my company, or nobody cares the name of my company at this point. People are like, oh, that's Hector's team, right? And it just kind of works that way, right? I mean, like Amazon is a thing, Jeff Bezos is a thing, but people really believe he's in Amazon. And I wish I would have built that type of brand. But at this point, it's worked so far. I became best friends with both of my partners that have this business. I've had people approach me and say, hey, I want to be part, I want to do something like this. I've never had the time to do it again. As a matter of fact, developing this was a long process. I mean, these two people I picked up 6-7 years ago, and I've been personally coaching and mentoring them for this much time. So I couldn't recommend a client with my eyes closed to someone that I haven't had a personal touch on helping develop. Now, each of them, they're their own person, they're accountants, they have their own opinions, even political. It's funny, we're best friends and we're on the opposite sides of the spectrum in political things even. But we have a common theme that we love QuickBooks, we love helping our clients make money, stay organized, and both of us are working hard towards satisfying our clients. And that culture you only build over time with trust, with mentorship, with help. And there's been many sleepless nights and much time of us consulting each other to be able to build something like that. And the most important thing is, you know, I think a business partner is much more valuable than an employee, because partners have dissent, right? Like people disagree, and in disagreement lies the opportunity, because when everybody agrees with the boss, no one's there to tell you there might be something wrong with your logic here, right? And people just go for it. But when you have partners, especially a concept like this, like three, you know, where there's always potential to have a let's call it a breaking boat. It's so that to me has been an absolute blessing. I think it was a wise decision to do that, and it has worked really well, I think.
Amazing. Okay, last question before we switch over to Q&A, because we've got a bunch of questions from the audience. And if
Sure.
audience, you have more questions, please add them now. So I think we can all say 2020 has been a bit surprising. I don't think anyone saw a lot of this stuff happening or coming. What has been your biggest takeaway from this year, your biggest learning?
Oh, well, my biggest learning is that if you're not learning, you're wasting your time. That absolutely is my biggest learning. So if you look at the firms that were successful right post shutdown, all the ones that knew how to use Zoom, all the ones that knew how to communicate virtually through Slack, all the ones that knew how to use virtual voice over IP phones, all the ones that knew what equipment to have and get to be able to have effective communications, those people hit the ground running. Now, many people a few months later kind of start getting it, and maybe not. I deal with some people sometimes that they don't know how to mute or unmute, or they don't know the concept of background noise, right? So you're having a meeting with dogs and stuff like that, and people seem to be okay with that, and they don't understand how excruciating painful it is to be trying to hearing someone over all this noise. So when when people knew how to do this preemptively, they were way ahead of the curve. They lost less clients. They picked up more clients. Okay, I know I got tons of clients that the first thing they told me is my CPA doesn't know how to use Zoom. He refused to use Zoom. I'm like, well, too bad. I know how to use Zoom. I will leverage that 100%. So I think that sometimes you don't know how far or how valuable your knowledge can go uh, uh, when it's needed. And if you don't have a system in place to be learning new things all the time, you at some point are going to are going to become irrelevant. So what I've been learning here is that all the companies that were ready to deliver online, all the companies that were able to do this because they knew how to use the technologies. They knew how to leverage the technologies. Those are the ones that came ahead of the curve. So the first thing I learned on the pandemic. The other thing that I learned on the pandemic is you will probably, and it's not over yet, so I can't really tell you definitely that's a definite learning, but I think this will be the only time in our lifetimes that we will ever have a situation where working in your pajamas is okay. Having a kid walk into your meeting is okay. People understand it. And I think what's happening is people are starting to understand the human aspect of work, and the businesses that embrace that with their employees are the ones that are going to be able to keep their top talent. The businesses that force people to work a 9 to 5 job, have no flexibility over PTO, don't invest in educating their employees, are very stringent about schedules and hours, and all these accounting firms that make accountants work until all hours of the night. Those people are going to lose their top talent. And I think that right now, what the pandemic has proven is that geography doesn't matter. What matters is talent. And I would say that's the most important thing. I have a question here that says, how do you find good talent? What a good question. So my answer to the question, how do you find good talent, is don't. Right? People are so obsessed about finding people that have the specific skills. In my experience, and I've hired few people and I've gotten rid of a few people, the ones that know the most are the worst, right? The ones that know the least, but have the hunger to learn, and they just have a great attitude and they're a culture fit. Those are the ones that stick the longest. All of my employees, all of them, started knowing absolutely nothing about QuickBooks. Most of them, I taught them a journal entry, but what that allowed me to do is teach them the right way from scratch instead of spending all this time having them unlearn. Unlearn is a bigger problem than learning, right? Having people unlearn bad habits is worse. So basically, I hired people that I like. I hired people that I think would be a good cultural fit. I I I I hire people that have hunger and attitude and are coachable, and I hire people that I would hang out with and have a beer with, and I prefer to invest in me training them rather than the opposite. I think too many accounting firms are looking for that specific skill and talent, and I prefer to hire the people in which the things I can teach, and the things I can't teach, they already come with it. You cannot teach good attitude. You cannot. You cannot teach positivity. You cannot teach coachability. You can't teach those things. So I get those things up front, and then the hard skills I teach easily. Right? I just have to invest more in teaching that. But the good thing about having a YouTube channel is it's an advertising channel for new customers, and it's also a training system for my employees. My employees are watching my YouTube videos during work all the time, during downtime, and I'm totally happy with that, because that means that I was able to make a video and serve two purposes.
So Hector, number one, where can people find you on YouTube? What is your username? What should we search for? And two, what prompted you to start a YouTube channel?
Sure. So my YouTube channel, all you have to do is search my name, Hector Garcia, CPA. I'm the only YouTuber with, I think I'm the only YouTuber with the word CPA on the on the YouTube name. But it's just search my name, Hector Garcia, CPA. And what prompted me, which interesting enough, is I started doing webinars for my peers, for other accountants and bookkeepers, or QuickBooks webinars. And I started that webinar series without a a money incentive up front. I said, I'll do this and we'll see what happens, right? And then at some point, people were asking me how to access the recording and send me the link to the recording. And I said, you know what? I'll just put the recordings of the webinars into YouTube. That way I can give people a link and that's it. And people don't have to, I don't have to answer that question a million times. Well, I ended up getting a bunch of people watch the videos in YouTube and then calling me and saying, can I hire you to do this? And I was like, whoa, wait a second. So I could do webinars, which I didn't know what I was doing them for. I didn't know if I was going to make any money with it. I knew that at some point I was going to get sponsors, and sure enough, Intuit and T-Sheets and Bill.com and all the big name brands, HubDoc, all the name brands, Canadian and American, started investing in the webinar series, and there were partners of the webinar series as well. But at the beginning, it was just create something worth creating and see what happens. And the positive accident is by putting them on YouTube, I realized how much powerful YouTube was than a webinar series. And then I basically made it a life goal to create at least one video per week for the past 6 years. And we are just hitting 100,000 subscribers. We have over 800 videos at this point, many hours of love input into that YouTube channel. And there's videos about accounting, about QuickBooks, about tax, mostly QuickBooks though. That's really what we're known for. Every once in a while, I'll sprinkle a video about marketing yourself or best practices for running an accounting firm or pricing, but those are not as popular as, how to fix a bounce check in QuickBooks, right? So the technical videos tend to be the most popular ones.
That makes sense. So someone's asked this here, do you consult with other accountants on how to grow their practice, like strategies and like pricing?
I don't.
Okay, easy
I
peasy.
don't. Yeah, I don't have, I want to, trust me, I want to help as many people as possible. I just don't have it, the time to build into that. However, I'll give you a quick asterisk to that. I did build a program called the Alt Accountant Program, which is a group coaching program that I did already done 3 cohorts. Every year we do it, we get like 10 to 12 people sign up. And basically we take people through a 6-week journey where we, not in a one-on-one scenario, but in a small group, like it's usually 4 or 5, and we walk them through positioning, building your positioning statement. Like for example, I'll give you, and I don't have one open now, so I don't have one to sell, but I want to give you an idea what is the type of things that I am willing to teach to other accountants in a small group environment. For example, if you're in a dinner party and somebody asks you, what do you do? The worst answer you can give is, I'm an accountant. All right, it's just the worst possible answer. First of all, because people are like, oh, accountant, geez, I got stuck with this guy, but the other reason is because accounting is one of those things that people paint their own picture in their head as to what that means. And you never want people to interpret what you do, right? Oh, this person, they're going to assume they do tax, or they are a bean counter, number cruncher. What you want to do is you want to be very precise on saying what you do. And it needs to include what your discipline is, what your specialty is, who your target client is, their problem, and what we call the desired future state. So for example, what I say is I help manufacturers fix their messy inventory. That's it. That's what I say, right? So what do you do? I'm actually an accountant. I'm a CPA. I do tax returns. But my sweet spot is manufacturers that use QuickBooks, that have messy inventory. That's what I'm good at, or at least that's what I told the world that I was good at, and I became that, right? Right? When I had enough clients that dare me to say, prove to me that you're good at that. So you pick a specific area that you want to focus on, right? And mine is fixing inventory, a specific industry that you want to do that. Mine is manufacturing, and then you pick a current state and a future state where the journey, the transformation. So when I say I help manufacturers fix their messy inventory, I know that I want manufacturers to have inventory messed up, that don't see the end in sight, they don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's so messed up that it's unfixable. But there's this one guy that when you meet him at a dinner party, he says he only does that. So somebody's willing to pay an accountant, let's call it that, let's say $2,000 to $3,000 a year to do a tax return, but somebody can pay triple that just to fix the messy inventory because it's a micro specialty. And people appreciate when people are masters of their craft. I know I do. Like I remember, and I think we're over a few minutes, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember, do we have a hard stop?
No, I think we're okay. We've got a
Okay.
couple more questions.
I remember when my sliding door was stuck, right? And then like my friend came to my house. It's like, this sliding door is so, you know, is so rough. He's like, why don't you talk to my sliding door guy? And I was like, you got a sliding door guy? That's a thing? Yeah, yeah, I got a sliding door guy. So I call Juan, the sliding door guy. The guy comes in, looks at my sliding door and says, yeah, it'll be 150 to fix. And I'm like, okay, how long will it take? He's like, 15 minutes. And I was like, damn, that's what I want. I want to be the guy that looks at something for 2 minutes, says it'll take 50 minutes to fix, says a price with confidence. I had no choice. I'd say, yeah, of course. And then the guy brings his toolbox. He's got a whole bunch of rollers. That's all he has. He's got the little rollers. He takes the thing apart, replaces the roller, cleans it up, puts it back up, try it, and the thing slides like magic. And you know what? I admire that, right? Because I asked the guy, what else do you do? I'm like, this is the best handyman I ever seen in my life. What else do you do? He's like, this is all I do. I just fix the rollers from sliding doors. I'm like, you make a living with this? He's like, yeah, well, you're my 27th call today. I'm like, holy crap. It's like, how many sliding doors are out there? But think about it. Every house in the world has a sliding door. And this guy only fixes that. So it's interesting, and I admire that. I love that. I love when someone is so confident that they can just fix one problem, and it's a perfect example how people are willing to pay a lot more to fix that specific problem. Like for example, fixing or replacing a door, typically it's less expensive than picking a lock from a door, in an emergency situation. So again, it's not the physical thing, it's the actual need that you're solving for your client. So when I saw that, I said, I got a niche down. I have to focus on being a specialist.
Nice. So we have a question here. So since you're a CPA and your partner isn't, do you ever run into any obstacles around that?
Yeah, so that's a great question because we have these separate firms, right? I have my firm, and my firm is a CPA firm, and my two partners, which is the case, they're studying for the CPA right now, but they're not CPAs. It's not an issue, right? And then basically we separate our services where when our clients contract us, we tell them that the tax return, which is going to be represented by a CPA, gets done under this company, and there's a contract for that. And then the bookkeeping and accounting gets done by the separate company, sister company, partner company, and that's separate like that. So this separation of companies also really helped with this, one's a CPA, one is not type of scenario. And it's actually worked out just fine.
Nice. So Hector, when you first started out, you were starting with basically like no training, no credential, nothing.
Nothing. I knew nothing.
And so, on that journey, when did you decide to get your CPA, and kind of what prompted that?
Right. Well, I decided to get my CPA when my third client showed up and said, "Are you a CPA?" And I said, "No." And they're like, "Then I won't hire you." I'm like, "Well, I don't do CPA work. I do bookkeeping. You don't need a CPA for that." But they're like, "You know what? I need someone that can do both." And I told them, I promise you that I'll be a CPA in 3 years and I'll be the best bookkeeper you ever had. And the client said, okay. It was an easy sell, but that kind of stuck behind my head. He said, you better become a CPA in 3 years. I'm counting on you on that. And I knew I had to do it anyway. I mean, it's part of the progress of any bookkeeper or accountant. It did require me to go back to school. I had to go back to school and get a master's in accounting and taxation. I actually have both. And then study for the CPA exam. It's a tough journey. It's a lot of work, but it's an incredible brand name. Like it's part of my YouTube channel, and people tend to trust you a lot just because you have those 3 letters. And I can tell you, I've been wrong more than I've been right. And being a CPA doesn't mean you know everything. It probably means it probably means you're aware of how little you know. But in certain cases, I can do CPA work. I can represent clients in front of the IRS. My work has some sort of credibility in the third party world. So it's something I decided to do in the middle of my career. Like I only got my CPA license in 2014. So I operated from 2009 to 2014 without any credentials whatsoever. And the only thing I offered was bookkeeping services.
Nice. That's awesome. Okay, just before we wrap up, quick plug on Relay. If you're not familiar with us, we're business banking that basically makes bookkeeping easy. So you actually get your own partner portal, so you can actually access all your Relay clients from your own partner portal. You get direct bank feeds into QuickBooks Online, into Xero with enriched data. So no more chasing down checks or anything like that. You just have the data in the accounting system, and you can access it inside of Relay. And lastly, we're actually the only bank in the world that integrates into QBO and Xero to automatically pull in unpaid bills. You get approval workflows. It's really sweet. Yeah, if you want to sign up, visit relayfi.com/partners. And that's it. Hector, this was amazing. This was such a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Joseph. Thank you very much, and good luck with Relay.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your
Bye.
Wednesday. Bye.